Welcome to the Lose Weight, Live Life podcast. If you're someone who would do anything to lose weight, yet finds it impossible to stick to a diet, to eat less, or just what you think you should, this podcast is for you. I am your host, certified life and weight mindset coach, Clair MACKENZIE. Listen in to learn how to stop overeating, lose weight for the last time, and create a relationship with food and yourself that you love, all without diet deprivation and self-sabotage. Hi everyone, and a very warm welcome to podcast episode number 133. Ditching diet mentality number 1, last chance eating. Before we dive into this episode, I just want to say thank you so much for being here and listening today. If you're a regular podcast listener and find what I share useful and helpful, then I would be incredibly grateful if you could just take a minute and rate and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts, or rate the podcast on Spotify, or through whichever podcast app you're listening to this podcast on. Highly rating and leaving a review means that Apple, Spotify, and the other podcast platforms will show it to more people, which means that others who maybe feel like they're in a struggle with their weight will discover they're not alone, and that what they're experiencing is very normal, and hopefully through this podcast we'll get some useful and supportive information to help them. So on to today's episode. For the next couple of episodes, I want to talk to you about behaviours that I see show up frequently in members of the Lose Weight, Live Life Academy and my private coaching clients, and they are all behaviours that are also very familiar to me as well, and I suspect many of you listening will relate to them. And they're behaviours that when we notice them and seek to understand them, we can attribute them to previous experiences of regular on-off dieting. And these behaviours are oh so normal, we're not often even aware that we're doing them. And they show up so frequently, they can make weight loss and weight management and creating a healthy relationship with food more challenging. And so that's why it's worth looking at them. But first, let's just recap, what is diet mentality? So diet mentality can be described as thoughts, beliefs and perceptions that either linger from past dieting experiences or that have been shaped and reinforced by diet culture. But it's not the thoughts and beliefs in isolation that are the problem when it comes to diet mentality. It's the feelings and emotions that those thoughts and beliefs create in our body, and the behaviours that they drive us to do that cause us problems and difficulties. So for more detailed exploration of this, I encourage you to go and check out podcast episode number 113 called Diet Mentality and Associated Feelings and Behaviours. And the diet mentality behaviour that I want to talk about today is what I am calling last chance eating. So last chance eating is the label that I have given to food decisions that we make based on the belief that we can't have whatever it is, doesn't matter what the food or drink item is, when we are, and then fill in the blank with whatever sort of term you use to describe being on a diet. So it could be being on a diet, it could say eating to lose weight, so thinking we can't have whatever it is because we're going to be eating to lose weight, or we might say because we're going to be being healthy next week or following our plan next week, or we might even say being good, in inverted commas, next week. There's lots of different ways to describe it, but essentially it's consciously or subconsciously saying to ourselves, I will eat this now because I either can't have it in the future, tomorrow, next week, whenever it is, or I don't want to eat it then. For some of us, this last chance eating happens infrequently before we start a new weight loss journey. And for others of us, it may seem to happen quite frequently. It could be every weekend, or even what can feel like or can be every evening. And so it might look like us doing any of these things. Eating up foods and drinks in the fridge and cupboard because we see them as foods and drinks that we're not allowed or we don't want to eat at some point in the future. It could be adding food or drink items, we might call these treats, to our shopping basket or online shopping cart because we have time to have them before we start our new healthy way of eating. It could be having the dessert when we're out for dinner because we're starting Monday with being good, going on the diet, however we phrase it, and we are wanting to maybe lose some weight before we go on our holiday. So we're going to have the dessert now because next week we're going to be working at losing weight. Last chance eating is any time we eat or drink something or justify eating or drinking something because we think we cannot or we should not eat it at some point in the future. And for many of us, letting go of this way of eating or drinking could make a significant difference in our weight and health. So let's dig a little deeper to explore why we do this. Most of you listening to this podcast have likely tried many diets with varying degrees of success, especially if, like me, you've struggled with your weight for much of your life. And those diets were very likely prescriptive in telling you what you could or could not eat. From shakes and bars diets where you don't eat any real food at all, to low-fat diets where you can maybe eat a bowl of pasta but not put any butter on it, to diets like the Atkins diet, which was a former version of the keto diet where, of course, we can't eat any carbohydrates or very little carbohydrates. And so, of course, because the way of eating on these diets was so specific, you had to prepare for them. You had to get the right, and I say that in inverted commas, foods in. And so as you went about preparing for your diet, you might have found yourself eating foods and drinking drinks that you weren't going to be allowed whilst you were on the diet. And that may have been because they were already in the house, so you ate them so that maybe you were telling yourself so they don't go to waste, which is essentially just using your body as a dustbin. Or maybe because as soon as you started focusing and thinking on this diet and noticing what you couldn't have, suddenly you found yourself wanting whatever it was more than ever. And because that's the thing with following rules around eating that are dictated to you by another person or program, you naturally want to rebel. It's human instinct. You are a grown human adult, and you're going to rebel against being told what you can and cannot do when it comes to something as fundamental and frequent as eating. So initially this behaviour may have shown up occasionally before a big diet effort, but as many of you will know, those big diet efforts rarely resulted in long-term success, and it was easy to fall into a pattern of on-off yo-yo eating. So we may have found that our twice yearly pattern of dieting started to become something that we maybe restarted every month. And then maybe, as we found it more and more difficult to stick to a diet because we were running out of new or different diets to try because we had tried them all and none of them seemed to be working, but we were still looking for that holy grail of a diet that would be the right one for us. So we found ourselves trying the same diet repeatedly, starting on a Monday, managing to maybe go 4 days, and then not managing to continue it through the weekend, telling ourselves that next week would be different, and eating our last chance foods at the weekend before starting restricting ourselves again on Monday. And then, before we knew it, maybe we were restarting daily, telling ourselves that we would start tomorrow. And then tomorrow comes and we maybe go most of the day eating the way that we said we would, or the way that we were dictated to by our diet. But then we find ourselves maybe with an energy slump in the mid-afternoon, or something has upset us, and we find ourselves having a small snack that we tell ourselves won't make a difference, probably a sugar-laden or a fine carb snack that maybe then triggered us to want more. And so then we eat more, and then we think that we failed. Well, what do we tell ourselves? We might as well eat more today because tomorrow will be different. So we might as well eat all of the things that we shouldn't have right now because we're going to be good, stick to our diet, whatever the phraseology is that we would typically use tomorrow. And around this cycle we go. Can you relate? When you think about how often you do this, can you see how much more difficult it's making weight loss for you? If you overeat every weekend because you're starting a diet and you're going to restrict yourself on Monday, the effects of that dieting and restriction are going to be masked for much of the week. Because even though we tend to think that the number we see on the scales today is the result of what we ate yesterday, the truth is there's quite an extensive lag period. So if you're overeating on the weekend and then restricting what you eat Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then you weigh yourself on Thursday, it's quite possible that you're not seeing a weight loss. You think what you're doing then isn't working, but really it's just that the overeating from the weekend is cancelling out the restrictive eating that you did Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so you're not seeing that net loss that you were expecting. And of course we tell ourselves from all of the hard work that we're putting in to stick to the diet. And so we lose our motivation and willpower, and we tell ourselves it's not working. And then we go around the cycle again and again and again. So how do you ditch this diet mentality behaviour? Well, the first thing is that you need to be aware of whether you're doing it. Is this pattern of behaviour showing up for you, and what are the specifics? What is your pattern of the foods that you eat, the drinks that you drink, when you have them, and what can you consider that is associated with last chance eating? And the only way to know this is to track and write down everything that you eat and drink, noticing the underlying reasons behind those food decisions. And by that, I mean the things that you say to yourself or think to yourself to justify eating foods that you believe will hinder your weight loss, so that you can identify patterns in what you think, feel, and do. When you explore your eating patterns in real time and you're not just thinking back about how you ate, because you're never able to do that accurately, you will discover so much more about your relationship with food that will be incredibly useful for you going forward. Once you're aware of what and when you're eating in this way, it's time to really examine what you're wanting and why. Now, for some of you, this will be more about the pleasure of the food than anything else. But for others of you, it will be more about how the food is helping you feel better in the moment. And you might realise that the food is not that important to you. You're going to want to know which of these it is. And if you want more help with that, do come and join us in the Lose Weight, Live Life Academy or consider private coaching. Now, whether it's more about the food or more about the feelings you're going to want, you're going to need different strategies. This isn't about willpower and motivation and restriction. This is about helping yourself by making it easy to eat the way you want to be the weight and health you want. Now, if you love crisps and you're knowingly or unknowingly telling yourself you can't eat crisps whilst you're losing weight, then anytime you're wavering in your weight loss efforts and you come off the diet eating program, however you describe it, so to speak, you're going to be innately compelled to eat crisps. And what I suggest that you do instead is think about what, when, and how you want to enjoy eating crisps in a way that doesn't hinder your weight loss long term and your weight management efforts. And it might take a bit of time for you to find that out as well. It might take a bit of trial and error. So this might be enjoying a packet of crisps with a drink on a Friday evening, because guess what? You can eat a packet of crisps and have a drink one evening a week and still lose weight and have a healthy diet. This is why in the Lose Weight, Live Life Academy, we never tell you what to eat, but instead help you to find the right way of eating for you that will enable you to lose and manage your weight for life. So if you find yourself being tempted with last chance eating, I encourage you to pause and ask yourself, what is this about for me? Ask yourself, is this about wanting this food out of the way so that you're maybe, for example, not feeling compelled to eat it next week? If that's what it's about, then I encourage you to either bin it or donate it or decide when and how you want to eat that particular food. Make a plan for how you want to consume it as a part of your regular eating whilst you're losing weight. If instead it's about telling yourself you cannot have something once you're eating to plan, then remind yourself you always get to choose and explore your relationship with that food. In addition to telling yourself you can't have it, ask yourself why you think that. Why is it you think that? Is it true? How is it true? How is it not true? What is it about that food that puts it in the shouldn't category? List all the reasons you want to eat it and all the reasons you don't. And then again, think about if you had the relationship with food and the weight and health that you wanted, what role would that food have in your diet, in your regular way of eating? Is it something you would choose to eat daily, weekly, monthly, or even less regularly than that? Once you start exploring your relationship with food in this level of detail from a place of self-empowerment, you might realize you don't even really want whatever it is. When you start to become more careful about your food choices, you might see that you would actually rather eat chocolate occasionally than cake occasionally. And then once you realize you don't want it, it becomes so much easier to not have it. And the more you do this, the more you become aware of your relationship with different foods, aware of your thoughts about them, what you make eating them and not eating them mean, the easier it becomes to start fully owning your food choices. And once you're owning all of your food choices and eating decisions, you can start to make them work better for you and love them more. That looks like discovering the right balance between eating for fuel and nutrition and pleasure and comfort that enables you to be the weight that you want to be whilst supporting your emotional and physical health. Okay, so that is what I wanted to talk to you about today. Thank you so much for listening. Do please, as I mentioned earlier, if you found this useful, please take 30 seconds to rate and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts or rate the podcast on Spotify or whichever platform you're listening on. And I look forward to speaking with you next week. Take care.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast and are ready to live a more intentional life, lose weight as a part of that journey, and create a relationship with food and yourself that you love, then I would be honoured to have you join the Lose Weight, Live Life Academy membership and coach with me. The programme offers different levels of support to suit you, including self-paced learning, twice weekly calls, private coaching, an amazingly caring community, and lots more. Find out all the details about when and how you can join at www.thebestyou.coach/coaching.